Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Wednesday evening to you all. Hope you guys are doing all right out there tonight and having yourselves a great and safe evening. Thankfully, we are past the severe weather, but unfortunately, two people lost their lives yesterday in Alabama, I believe. And what's wild about this is it happened in the slight risk. I mentioned over the last few videos breaking down the days and hours leading up to the severe weather event yesterday. Just to remember and keep in mind, severe weather can happen outside of the moderate risk, the high risk, the enhanced risk. And where this actually happened, where two people unfortunately lost their lives, were in the slight risk, and it happened overnight. So just remember that going forward. When we're talking severe weather, always stay weather aware. Have a weather radio, just ways to get alerts. A lot of times on people's phones, for example, a few weeks back, we had a tornado warning at about 3:30 in the morning here in Lexington County, where I live in South Carolina, and it woke, I swear, at least half the county up. So definitely have those alerts turned on your phones. Just have a way to have them phones turned up, and just have a way to get alerts. It's very unfortunate. Where prayers and thoughts are out to everybody that was negatively affected by this event. I know a lot of people suffer from the storm anxiety. And it's very unfortunate. When I heard about the news, I was like, wow, I thought we got out of this scot-free, but we did not. So thoughts and prayers are to everybody impacted, especially the friends and family of the people who lost their lives. So the good news is we're moving past that. We're going to winter weather now. And in tonight's video, we're going to discuss just that and the potential pattern change that could happen sometime in December. It's the last day of November. Tomorrow starts a new month, the last month of the year, December 1st, one of my personal favorite months of the year. And listen, all signals, not just one or two models, but all signals on these long-range ensembles, which are respectable things to look at in the long range, points to massive blocking in Greenland, which we call a negative NAO, which normally, when you have a couple other factors that are working together, symbolizes a favorable pattern in the eastern U.S. for winter weather and cold. But there's a lot to talk about this, and we're going to break this down. I know a lot of you folks have already heard about this. And guys, this isn't going to be this flashy video that you guys are probably hoping it's going to be, where I show a snowstorm happening on December 11th and we break it down. Guys, it's November 30th. All I can tell you is we're going to talk about what's driving this potential significant, maybe abrupt change sometime in the second week of December. And a lot of people are talking about this more and more as we go to each day and day. So we're going to break this down for you guys, figure out what we do know, talk about what we do know, and see, for you winter weather fans like me, if we can reel in some type of winter weather, maybe even for areas further south, just in time for the holidays. So if you guys have not subscribed, always consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. And if you guys got anything that I can pray about, pray over, please put it in the comments below. It gives me an opportunity to pray over it, and it gives others an opportunity to do so too. I do apologize. That intro went over 3 minutes long. I know a lot of people hammer me for that, but that's why I've been trying to put those timestamps in so you can skip right over it. But anyways, here we go. And like I said, I'm going to try to explain this in the best way the audience, you guys, can understand, because I don't want to come on here, show you the GFS and European run, show you some crazy snowstorm 288 hours out, say, okay, there's a possibility that could happen, and then head on out. There's so much more that goes into this, guys, but I'm also going to show you that. I'm going to show you what the GFS is showing, because it did show, a crazy run that always excites the weather community, regardless if it has an actual good chance of happening or not. But I can tell you, a lot of people frown upon showing these long-range models, but it's a great thing to look at sometimes, because what we're seeing 10 to 15, 18, 20 days out is it's starting to show up on some of the operational ones. Can we inch it into the medium term? That's what we're going to try to do over the next several days. So for you folks who like snow around the holidays, this video might be for you. So here we go. So all you folks remember 2010, right? Most of you guys do, especially in the Southeast and the Eastern U.S. It was a blockbuster month, one of the most highly favorable patterns in recent memory for winter weather in the Eastern U.S. We had the Christmas Eve snow in the South, the Christmas Day snow, the day after a blockbuster snowstorm that crushed areas of the Northeast. We had multiple small events even earlier in the month, and this was all because of massive blocking in Greenland up here. It's called a negative NAO. which allowed for cold air to dump down here, a favorable storm track, and everything just worked together to make 2010 December a very special month for even areas pretty far south. That was the month where Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, so many people in the areas further south saw that white Christmas. We don't see that much in the South. I mean, it's hard enough to get it, even areas of the Ohio Valley, Northeast, places like that. So let's talk about this. Here we go. Right now we have a trough moving through the eastern U.S. You see these blues, and if you're confused at what you're looking at, the warmer colors, the oranges, the reds, even the purples, that's ridging. And of course, the more warmer the color looks once you go the orange to red, and then we get into purple, think of that as a pretty extensive blocking. So that's blocking. The blue you see is troughing. So think of that as probably cold air or some kind of low pressure. So here we go. We're moving through this in time. We move this trough on out of the way. It's a very fleeting. It'll cool down over the next couple of days across the eastern U.S., but it moves on out. Ridging builds over the central and eastern U.S., and then troughing sets up over the western U.S. So this will cool down the western U.S. And normally when the west is cold, the east is normally warm. So we call this a negative PNA. And that means when you have troughing in the west. So at the same time, you have a sustained negative EPO, which means you got blocking in the general area of Alaska. Now it gets even more in depth. Where does that block set up? Does it set up kind of between Alaska and Russia? Does it set up more so over eastern areas of Alaska? Where does it set up? So we're not going to get that specific with things right now. And then at the same time, you have blocking emerging over the North Atlantic, over Greenland. So here comes the blocking. At this time, we're getting into this weekend. We have a little dip in the jet stream. As this blocking begins to set up here, the reds up here in Greenland, this allows, you already can see it, little cross-polar flow. This allows for a dump of cold air into Canada. This will start to cool down the northern U.S. Now, this moves through. You're still fighting this ridge. And at this point, we're getting into early next week. We're still fighting this ridge down here in the southern U.S., even parts of the southeast. And this pesky little Pacific low over here that we need to get rid of. But then we have this ridging over Alaska that's sustained. It's staying. It's not going anywhere. That's that negative EPO that we need to stay in place. So here comes this cold air coming down into Alaska. If you're confused at what date we are in or whatsoever, look right here, the 5th of December. And don't focus too much on the Zulu time. Don't worry about that. There's no point in getting that specific about what hour of the day it is in December. So we're moving through in time, getting through about midweek next week. Big blocking. I mean, some of the most impressive blocking that we've seen in over 10 years starting to emerge over Greenland. This is a stout negative NAO, which is something that you need to get a good storm track and a dislodgement, if you will, of cold air down into the U.S. And when this blocking sets up here, this kind of jams up a storm track to the south. Now, where does that storm track set up? We're not sure. But we start to lose the EPO a little bit, but it's around neutral. You still got blocking up here near Alaska, and this cold air, you still got ridging down here in the south, which is still going to kind of keep the average just slightly above average temperatures for the south. But here comes this cold air. Now, what happens here? I mean, you have just a blockbuster blocking over Greenland. So what happens here is troughing begins to emerge off the eastern U.S. So you still got a negative PNA. A positive PNA, guys, is when you have ridging over the western U.S. So I would argue once we get to the 10th, the pattern is becoming more favorable. This is as we're getting into the second week of December. I don't think the first week of December is going to bring much. What I consider the first week of December, I consider that the 1st, starting tomorrow, through the 8th or the 7th, even though that might not actually fall into an actual Sunday to Saturday week. That's what I consider week 1 of December. So moving forward here in time, you got sustained blocking up in Greenland. So all of a sudden, you don't really see much of anything. You don't see any blue anomalies. You don't see any red anomalies. So Look what happens right here. Now notice this is 10 to 11 days out, pretty far out. All of a sudden you get ridging to the west. And guys, I know this is probably blowing a lot of people's minds. But I think it's important to show this. There's so much more than what you just see on a model run 250 hours out. Ridging begins to emerge in the western U.S. We call this a positive PNA. When you get this, you have a good chance to be colder in the U.S. So at this point, you're maintaining somewhat of a negative EPO, even though it's around neutral to slightly negative, and then you still got blocking up in Greenland. And there's a lot of guidance that shows that this is just going to keep on recurring throughout the month of December. And what happens here is you got a classic look of a negative NAO, a slightly negative EPO up here. If I'm getting my letters mixed up, I do apologize. EPO, slightly negative EPO, and then you got a positive PNA, which means ridging, which means warmer than average temperatures in the west, and then you got cooler than average. You see the blues setting up in the eastern U.S. And right here, this pattern right here certainly is supportive for a storm in the eastern U.S. with cold air in place. And this sustains itself as we get into 15 days out. It continues. So, a lot of people are saying watch the December the 15th to 20th time frame. But I think it could begin very early, right in the middle of the month. So the same thing showing up with the GEFS ensembles. I just showed you the European ensembles. We moved through in time. We're not going to stay as long as we just did. But here it goes. Here goes the dislodgement of cold air into the Canada, into the northern U.S. Negative NAO setting up right here. Negative EPO setting up right up here. And cold air at first moves into the western U.S. A negative PNA. I know, guys. I can almost see your jaw dropping while you're watching this, and I'm trying, guys. Hopefully, it'll make more sense here in a second. But as we're moving forward here, you still got ridging in the southeast, but we keep moving. Still wild blocking up here in Greenland, and then here it goes. Same kind of deal. Just right after you get past December 10th, the positive PNA begins to set up, warmer than average, ridging in the west, and then here comes the blue anomaly setting up right here, and then troughing steps up in the eastern U.S., and there's just going to be an active storm track right here. So what does this mean when it comes to temperatures, guys? Setting going forward here, you notice, and this is pretty much simple, guys. This is temperatures compared to average in Fahrenheit. So above average temperatures remain in the southern U.S. As we're getting into early next week, we continue. But look as this colder than average temperatures begin to ooze down into the Great Lakes region, Ohio Valley. We're starting to get into late next week, about a week out from today. Colder than average temperatures begin to move into the northeast Ohio Valley, and then they begin to ooze into the southeast somewhat. And then as we're getting into about 10 to 11 days out, here it comes. Here comes the warming in Canada, Greenland, and then it's cooling down in the eastern and central U.S. So it's pretty wild to see, and then it gets really well below average potentially. But notice we're past 300 hours out. It's very hard to take serious. But this looks favorable, guys. It really does. And one thing I'll show you here, this is winds at 200 millibars. So this is way up in the atmosphere. I mean, I'm talking, guys, I'm talking, 30-something thousand plus feet up in the atmosphere, right around where the jet stream looks. So this is what we look at as far as where the jet's setting up, which is where these low pressures track. So you notice the general track. Let's back it up because we're a little bit too far. You notice the track going into this weekend is way up here to the north in the central U.S. But watch how this inches more and more south in time as this troughing sets up over the eastern U.S. We'll keep going in time, getting 10 days out. Okay, we're getting 11, 12, 13 days out. And look, the track is way down here with cold air settling in up here. That means we're going to have some kind of track of a low pressure potentially riding through the mid-Atlantic, northeast, maybe the southeast. And I can tell you, guys, I know a lot of my audience is in the southeast. I get it. But this looks favorable, at least at first, more so for the mid-Atlantic and the northeast. But guys, big old but here. Big old but. As we get a little bit deeper into December, can we can we get a snowpack in the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic? Can we get some kind of sustained snowpack up here? And then all of a sudden, maybe mid to late month, really late month, we get some kind of Southeast events. A lot of times, the Southeast has to miss a couple times before we get in with the fun. So, but I really think if you're in the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, I think we're going to get a big storm sometime it's probably maybe around the second or third week of December. I'm sorry, guys. Y'all hear my little girl coughing in the background. We have had a cough in our household for what seems like a millennium now. So if you're hearing that in the background, it's my little girl coughing, trying to get her feeling a little bit better. But one thing that matches what everybody in the weather community is starting to chirp about is the professionals for the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook. This goes from the 8th through the 14th, which the 14th to me starts to symbolize that a mid-month time frame. We're starting to see below average temperatures show up, the possibility for below average temperatures. I mean, look at this. This goes all the way down to the areas of the deep south, the mid-south. But look at this little area right here in the mid-Atlantic. I'm telling you guys, it's setting up. The pieces are starting to come together, and the professionals have always seen it. I'm not saying that they have not seen it, but they are starting to kind of sound the alarm on it, saying, okay, now we've always seen what you've seen, but we've seen it long enough to where we can throw this a bone now and say, hey, I think the pattern's going to shift mid-month. This is good to see, considering the fact that things were looking well above average, and they will. Probably over the next 5 to 6, 7 days for a lot of people, it's going to be a warm start to December. But things are going to escalate quickly around mid-month. So let's look at what a lot of people probably clicked on this video for. Let's see if where are the models showing some kind of system. Is it showing it anywhere? Is there a snowstorm showing up? Let's take a look at the GFS. GFS moving forward here in time. We get into tomorrow. Quiet weather. We have a low pressure that flies across southern Canada, the northern plains, delivers some snow for areas that it's perfectly normal to see snow this time of the year. This moves through. And then what I think that could be a stage setter for the beginning stages of this pattern change is a system we'll watch early to midway next week. This could potentially bring some kind of snow to areas of the Ohio Valley, the Midwest. We'll see what it does. But of course, no details are really here yet. But one of these things we're looking at here, sorry I had to stop the video really quickly there, is moving past this system. There's going to be some kind of piece of energy probably early to midway next week, like I just mentioned. And will this deliver some snow for the Northeast? Who knows? But really, we watch after that. And this is getting into a pretty far out territory, what we call the fantasy land, the long term. And moving forward here, we see the cold air. You see these blue lines right here, the 540 millibar line, 540 line, I'm sorry. That tells me there's a lot of cold air starting to ooze into the U.S. And then all of a sudden, we start to see some fantasy storms showing up. Here comes one right here. All of a sudden, low pressure pops up. There's cold air nearby, and it wants to deliver a snowstorm or a snow event for areas in the Mid-Atlantic, North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, and then it bombs out right here. And then big dump of cold air follows behind it. So do I think there's going to be a snowstorm around the December 11th time frame in North Carolina, Virginia? That is not what I'm saying, guys. What I'm saying is, when you're looking at these models, when does the operational runs start to latch on to the idea that the ensembles are showing? Which is what we always should be looking at past 7 to 8 to 10 days. But I really think we're going to see more and more of these fantasy storms to the point where we're going to see them so frequently that eventually they're going to make it into the medium range, and then we're actually going to be forecasting them. So it's just something to watch. Cold air breaks out over the southeast after this, and then another big winter storm cranking up around mid-month. But I can tell you that the European, which only goes out 10 days, we're going through in time, getting through this weekend, getting into early next week. Not a whole lot going on. Here comes a system. That's that system early, midway next week that we need to watch. Not a whole lot going on there. But then the cold air begins to ooze. Maybe the first wave of cold air moves into areas of the Great Lakes, Northeast. And then after that, what happens? What happens? We'll stop the run here, and it looks like a shot of cold air is about to move in with moisture nearby and showing snow around the New York City area. But it's 10 days out. We don't know what's going to happen. What I can tell you is one thing that we have been struggling with is I noticed I kept saying the PNA. And I said negative PNA means ridging in the west. And this is one thing that we're struggling with to get cold in the eastern U.S., at least it's staying cold. It looks like it goes neutral potentially around the 12th, the 13th, the 14th of December. So if this can manage to go neutral, then it might not go positive. But if it goes neutral, then I really think things are going to set up. That means not really troughing or ridging really anywhere. And I think that could be a pattern with a part where the pattern really starts to come into its own. But one thing we're going to keep for the foreseeable future is the North Atlantic Oscillation, and it's staying negative. Obviously it's the zero line and everything below it's negative. This is going to remain negative for a long time. So I felt like I was everywhere in that video, and if I do and nobody gained anything from that video, I do apologize. But ask questions in the comments. I'll try to answer them. It's a difficult thing to talk about when there's nothing to actually latch on to, but trying to give you an idea of what's kind of coming. And I think that this is going to be our biggest topic of December. It could be very active, guys. Slow start, like I mentioned earlier in the post, but it really could turn up here in the next week or two. I really think it could. Could be wrong, though. Could be. Could eat crow. But that's all I got, guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all, and have yourselves a great night.